I'm sure most of you know when this photo was taken. For many Americans, for most of the world perhaps, the political chaos that took place at the US Capitol building on January 6th, 2021 was a harrowing event. But for my family, and for thousands of others across the Washington, D.C. area, January 6th meant something entirely different. My parents couldn't go to work. I couldn't go to school. Armed soldiers and military trucks filled every alleyway, and 10-foot walls barred most from entering the district. And what most people don't realize is that our capital, which at the time looked more like a police state, didn't go back to normal right away. For months, the soldiers kept watch, the walls towered over us, and I felt like the world around me was crumbling. And 2 years later, I'm still trying to make sense of it all. I mean, how could I ever think of American democracy the same way? How could Americans get so lost in conspiracy theory, so lost in a false reality? Well, just as I was pondering these questions, I was lucky enough to attend a Shabbat service last fall, which has since helped me tremendously. And I want to share some of what I've learned with all of you. On that particular morning, the passage that was read aloud to me detailed the story of Migdal Babel, or the Tower of Babel. Just 9 lines long, the Tower of Babel, an infamous story in the Torah and an important artifact of Western culture, follows a civilization dedicated to building a tower with its top in the heavens, Rosho B'Shamayim. This tower was meant to be the pinnacle of civilization, something that others would look at in awe. However, as these people became more materialistic, worshiping the idea of constructing this tower, God became angry. And as the Torah tells us, he came down and confounded their language. He came down and baffled their language. He then scattered the people all over the face of the earth, and they eventually had to stop building the tower. For if this was the way they would use their ability to communicate, well, then they would no longer have that privilege. And when I was little, my Hebrew school teachers would use this story as a way to suggest how all of the languages of the world were created. Suddenly, I spoke English, and another person spoke Hebrew and Mandarin and French, and no one could understand each other. But what if it wasn't meant to be taken so literally? Reflecting on the story now that I'm older, it all seems very evident. When God came down and baffled their language, he exterminated the people's common culture, their customs, their ability to reconcile, to listen. And why? I mean, why was God so upset? Well, the Torah tells us in verse 4 that the people came together and said, V'naseh lanu shem, and let us make a name for ourselves. And suddenly it becomes clear. The tower was never about the betterment of civilization at all. Instead, the tower was about the most narcissistic quests for prestige and fame. So when the rabbi recited the story that one Shabbat morning, I began to think back to January 6th, to those giant metal walls, to mass political polarization, to Elon Musk and Twitter and Facebook and 4chan, and I realized that thousands of years later, the same forces that humbled the people of Shinar are ever present. Those same forces is our internet. It's our algorithms. Like Babel, the internet purports to be an amazing, coordinated endeavor that will supposedly serve as our biggest success. But, like Babel, the internet also has the ability to feed and encourage our most hubristic, most self-involved quests for achievement and influence. And despite this, I would be remiss if I didn't mention that the internet does have its benefits. I mean, we've created the potential for something great. And I believe we first saw that back with the Arab Spring in 2011. Here, new technologies like Bitly links and Facebook served as a saving grace, a central hub for communities demanding justice to come together in their pro-democracy, anti-corruption pursuits. But just 12 years later, what once served as the biggest hope for peace and unity in almost all of human history is now causing severe political polarization, according to at least 79% of those surveyed by Pew Research in December 2022. 86% say that social media makes us less civil in the way we talk. Again, that's the way we talk about politics. And if you're worried about social media's effects on American democracy, well, you're not alone. So are 64% of Americans. And how did we get to this state of fragmentation? Well, until about a millisecond ago in contemporary culture, broadcast news and newspapers dictated the national agenda. But with the rise of cable television and the erasure of the fairness doctrine, the very ethos of journalism, impartial, unbiased journalism faded away. Now, over half of Americans get their news from social media, and of course, I'm all for social media increasing news literacy. But when a recent poll said that, again, over half of Americans claim Facebook limited their exposure to media outlets offering a different viewpoint than their own, it can and does have dire effects. Today, newspapers aren't dictating the national agenda anymore like they were decades ago. Their reporting now centers around what happens in the digital sphere. The town square, once a place for people to come together and share information, has now become digitized, abstracted, generalized, further removing us from concrete human connection. This digital town square, with all of the ideological blinders it is replicating, is now dictating our national agenda. So how could humans ever share the same language anymore? It's impossible. When internet algorithms are designed to treat information and facts as advertisement, when they are designed and equipped to amplify the voices of political extremists more than ever, we are almost guaranteed to be engulfed in a race for attention. And according to scholars like Jonathan Haidt, who have actually made similar connections between the Tower of Babel and this new type of polarization, Twitter and Facebook only exacerbated the downfall when they introduced the like and reshare button over 10 years ago. And even their own co-creators have since called it akin to handing a 4-year-old a loaded weapon. And he was right. Chris Retherall was right. For example, in 2013, a young PR executive named Justine Sego tweeted to her some 100 followers, "Going to Africa, hope I don't get AIDS. Just kidding, I'm white." Pretty bad. But by the time she landed, Sego's name was the #1 worldwide trend. She had been tweeted more than 30,000 times, and the hashtag has Justine landed yet 100,000 times. And of course, while I don't condone what Justine Sego said by any means, I'm sorry to say, but Twitter users didn't solve racism by initiating an online dogpile. All they did was ruin one woman's life. She was fired from her job, and she lost so many contact with her friends and family. So this story reminds us of a powerful midrash, a powerful Torah commentary, one where we learn that if a builder carrying bricks high up in the tower, no one batted and fell off, then no one batted an eye. But if a brick fell, then everyone stopped work and cried, "Woe unto us, when will another be brought up?" We understand further that the power these people were after wasn't to do good. They mourned their fallen bricks and not their fallen people. They worshipped the tower itself and the power they thought it would bring. And just like those in the land of Shinar, we worship the algorithms themselves and the power we thought they would bring. Because this was where anger was the norm, never communion. Where shame was expected, never due process. And just a decade later, again in the case of January 6th, anger did substitute communion. Violence did substitute communion. Shame did substitute due process. It's an impossible feeling to miss in American life today. But it's more about what these stories represent, what they say about the progression or the decline of American life that mean everything. I'm sure everyone in here can recount a time when social media alienated them, when they felt like the world around them was crumbling too. I've talked today a lot about how divided we all are, about what's dividing us, about who's it happened to in the past, and about what might happen if we don't change soon. And people always say, well, how do you think we can fix this? And I always seem to respond with the same answer. Well, I don't know. I like to complain. And though it's kind of a lighthearted joke, even though I really like complaining, there's a little bit of truth to it. I'm not perpetually online. I don't have a TikTok account. I stay far away from the cesspool that is Twitter. I read many, many books, never infographics from social media. I take the time to connect with people, with nature, with God. I'm not perfect. No one is. But what I can say is that by doing all of these things, I've came to understand that Americans aren't actually as divided on all the topics we like to name. We just don't know how to listen to each other anymore. So, I can't reset the foundations, the internet's foundations, I can't recode Facebook's algorithms. I can't even try and convince you to delete social media if I tried. But what I can tell you is to get outside. Touch some grass, people, for real. For the sake of literally everyone, go outside and see the light of day. And please connect with something bigger than yourself, bigger than the little glass box in your pocket. And remember to listen with an open mind. I promise you'll be better for it. Thank you.